Ja, herzlich willkommen zum heutigen Panel.
Welcome back to this panel with the title Artificial Stupidity, Accidents and Fallacies of Technical Intelligence. I'm happy to be the presenter of this panel discussion. I would like to welcome Professor Dr. Elisabeth André, computer scientist and AI researchers, as well as Moritz Ingwersen, junior professor with focus of literature, focusing on science fiction studies, and Robert Geirhos, computer scientist and PhD student. We have 60 minutes for this panel discussion, and after 30 minutes of discussing with the three panelists, we would like to open this discussion to your questions. We have 2 microphones in this hall, and for your information, we will also be able to include questions from our virtual audience. So let's start. As we all know now, artificial intelligence is very popular, but we hardly know what it exactly means. Many dreams and anxieties are linked to artificial intelligence, machines that take over human activities, even replace our partners or governments. That really moves us. We have hopes for utopian futures, but also anxieties. We all know the science fiction classic Odyssey in the Universe or in Space, which is a good example in my opinion. I would like to highlight that dreams, hopes, and anxieties are nothing new when it comes to the current AI hype. Rather, this shows that our wish for developing an intelligent machine is embedded in our cultural history. And it is so fascinating for us because intelligent machines really try to negotiate limits of what is possible and what humans are capable of doing. Our panel will deal with artificial stupidity, and we will discuss different activities that are taken over by AI. So right now we will not focus on the question of whether machines are able to think. Rather, we would like to talk about this controversial utopian idea, and we will try to deconstruct the terms of why are people fascinated by AI and when do intelligent machines actually fail and what are impacts for our society. We will also talk about the polarity between good and bad AI, and I would like to ask you, Robert, what can you tell us from your point of view of what you have already discovered in research? What is AI capable of? And what not. Thank you very much for raising this interesting aspect. We use it on a day-to-day basis, and some of you may not have even realized that they're using it every day. For example, if you use Google Maps to find this museum this morning. In general, things that human beings are able to do in a period of 1 or 2 seconds, these are things that intelligent machines will probably be better in. If you think about diagnostics or analyzing an image, that is something intelligent machines will perhaps be better than we are in the near future. However, when we talk about unexpected events, machines will not surpass us in the near future. For example, an intelligent machine may be able to recognize a cow in a picture faster than we are. But if something unexpected happens, if the cow is depicted on a beach or in the snow and the AI wasn't trained on that, then it fails. The system is confused, and that shows us that these are the limits of artificial intelligence and that the machine did not really understand what a cow actually is and that the concept of cow doesn't depend on the background. Generally speaking, can you tell us about an accident caused by AI that everyone will remember. Of course, I'm thinking about autonomous driving and the accidents of different Tesla cars, also about social discrimination in 2015 when the Google algorithm depicted or labeled black people as gorillas. Apart from these incidents, can you tell us about other stories, anecdotes of stupid AI or AI failures? Yes, maybe from a different context. We thought that we could develop procedures that would explain AI in a better way. And if people understand how it works, then they would trust AI more, because if you become more transparent, then these systems are more trustworthy. We did that using the computer game Pac-Man. We explained how AI agents acted, and we evaluated that with our users. We learned that users didn't trust AI more, but less, because they understood that the agent weren't as intelligent as they believed in the first place. I will not tell you about errors in terms of AI-based research, but when it comes to errors and mistakes that we made when we think about AI and artificial production, if an intelligent machine fails and it didn't accomplish what it was supposed to do, then it's always related to the AI not wanting to comply, of wanting to conquer humanity, of trying to oppose the system. And these are narratives that we in the countries here of the West have heard multiple times. So the idea that intelligent machines try to overthrow their masters. That would have been my follow-up question. Can you tell us, and I know 5 minutes will not be sufficient, but why are we so obsessed with building autonomous agents? So something that can actually simulate our way of thinking, our intelligence? And is there a continuity that goes back farther than the current AI hype? Well, there are two narratives in terms of AI. First of all, the dominant human species that strives to be a god tries to create an imitation of him or herself that is able to deceive others. And then the question is whether you recognize if this is artificial or human, and to create a servant that, and at the same time, we feel that we lose control over these intelligent machines that are becoming bigger than we are. If we think about Frankenstein, for example, who tried to find out who he is and realized that he also was able of thinking, or in the 80s, where we believed that AI was a diffuse system that we didn't have any control over because we're small humans that do not have any power over it. So I think these are the two main narratives that go back in time. If we look at the medieval times and Golem, and in Jewish philosophy, we find the idea of creating somebody who is then used as a servant and influenced through magic, up to the automatic machines that were developed in the 18th century. That were shown to the audience, and they were asked whether that is an autonomous being or just a machine, until until now reaching the most recent AI-based narratives, as you already mentioned, Space Odyssey. So it would be interesting to talk more about what autonomy actually implies in terms of autonomous driving and artificial intelligence.
This brings me to the next question. Elisabeth, the subtitle of our panel is Accidents and Fallacies of AI. This is exciting. This notion of a fallacy of illusion, which you have described very well, in how much is it inscribed in the idea of intelligence or in the idea of automatons? We create something like human beings and it will be intelligent. Well, the Turing Test, for instance, but the path there is important. Or this kind of deception, this pretense. So let's talk more about the deception or the illusion and not, well, this is an intelligent machine, so let's deconstruct that a bit more. Answer, the Turing Test. This is a test invented by Alan Turing in order to find out whether a machine, as far as its capability of thinking is concerned, is similar to human beings. For that test, a human interacts with a computer behind a wall. The person cannot see or hear the computer, and based on a conversation, on utterances, the human being will have to decide, the person will have to decide whether they are communicating with a machine or with a human being. And if that decision cannot be made, the machine has won. As far as deception is concerned, well, we pretend as if AI had introduced fallacies or this illusion. But things we fall for, where we are deceived because somebody dresses in a certain way, behaves in a certain way, or because somebody has a nice voice which brings across competence no matter what they are saying. So machines make this mistake when you use AI for the selection of staff, for instance, for job interviews. If you haven't seen it here at the museum, there is a very nice exhibit coming from the Bavarian radio station, illustrating rather nicely if you give an interviewee glasses, so they are wearing glasses, that makes a completely different impression. And now AI is doing that. Companies have specialized in this, but it happens to us, human beings, as well. That sometimes we think, well, they must be competent, and then we realize afterwards, well, what they said, it wasn't that smart after all, so I was deceived by appearances. This brings me back to Robert and his research, because there is a great example behind that all. When we talk about machine failure or about machine intelligence, as you put it, it's socio-technical systems. It's never the case that the machine wants to deceive me on purpose. Based on the observations we've just made, I think it would be exciting to hear from you, and I told you about it in the run-up to this event. You work on neural networks. You've got the hope and the optimism that one day this technology will be able to detect things, and not just to detect things, but to understand matters, which brings me to a crucial point, the assumptions, namely, behind artificial intelligence. Maybe you could share your thoughts with us, what you mean by all that. Answer. In our day-to-day lives, what I like is to compare people and machines. Where are they good? Where do they make machines? Machines making mistakes which humans would not make, and vice versa. At the moment, there is a big problem, namely, And it's difficult whether to call it stupid or extremely smart. Thus, machines are very smart at finding abbreviations when they have a task, or to find shortcuts, rather. Let's say the task is, machine, please tell me whether somebody is a good job applicant based on a photo. I mean, this is a bit of a problem anyway. There should be much more that comes into it. If you give a training set to the machine, those have been the successful applicants in the past, those have been unsuccessful, and the machine goes for the simplest way of explaining that, namely, who wears the nicest outfit, the nicest clothes. For instance, if in the past more men were hired, AI would detect that and would recommend only men. This happens under the carpet, so to speak, or happens without it being apparent. And this is not what we want, and this is a big challenge to go about that. Namely, the tasks we give to machines to solve them. And it's difficult for us to decide when are we satisfied, how can you judge it all, and there are different solutions for that. You could compare it with people. If the machine were to come to similar decisions like people, we are satisfied. Or we have to look more closely and verify every step of the decision-making process. Question. We have a debate about training sets, and the training sets, the data are distorted. They don't mirror the complexity of the world. Too many men, for instance. Too many male faces are used as a training set. When training facial recognition software, for instance, I would be interested in the following. Is there something like an unbiased training set? Because to err is human. You've mentioned that. When would it be okay? Because we are fallible. When we look at other people, when we meet people, we are fallible as well. You've mentioned an example. We are biased and prejudiced as well. Can you deprogram this kind of bias? I mean, it's an open question. Answer. This bias and this prejudice is needed for simplification. When we interact with our environment, then stereotypes are being activated. When I was 16, I was in a big city. It was during the night, 11 p.m. I got lost, and I felt insecure. Who should I ask for help? And I was looking for families with small children, where you could say, this is a great bias, because I trusted them more. I didn't know them either, but why did I pick families? Why would I trust more a family with small children, them rather than others? Yesterday it was mentioned, there is a nice application by IBM online. You can try different fairness metrics, and you see you have to make compromises. If you want to have a high degree of fairness, maybe the detection rates will not be quite as high and precise. I did a test. There is not just this compass, a data set for criminals, which is cited very often. A German professor has come up with a data record of financial data, and I presented this to an audience, and I said, with this system, young people are disadvantaged when loans are discussed. I was active in the banking industry, and she said, well, this is correct. And that led to a discussion, which I liked, because we discussed that very often. We say the systems are unfair, but at the same time, as a human being, you resort to those simplification strategies as well. During that event, we couldn't sort out whether it was good or bad that a certain group of people were disadvantaged. The point is, when you realize that a system which we have built unknowingly advantages or disadvantages certain people, and if it's groups which we want to treat in the same way as a society, then we have to intervene. But this bias as such is nothing bad in general. It can help us coming to faster and better decisions, but not in every case. What is bad is if a machine does something and makes decisions without us being clear that a group we don't want to disadvantage is put at a disadvantage and is being discriminated against. There is no unbiased data record. Every data set, because somebody has selected, collected, evaluated, labeled this data set, it will always be biased. If I have a face and I label it, this is highly reductive, and this is not how we function as human beings. We need simplification, but we never break it down to a single parameter. The decision-making process for AI, which recognizes certain patterns, so this logical, rational decision-making process, which is assumed, this is not how we make decisions. For us, we do it in an effective way. Affection comes into it. It reminds us of our uncle or whatever. We can go back. We can revert our decisions. We can go back on our decisions. Now I've seen all the data. Now I have to re-evaluate it all. And that gets lost in an AI decision-making process. So gets lost in those simplifications and those abstractions. This is where the problem is. It's not a problem, but we have to see it, we have to recognize it as an inherent mechanism of what we call artificial intelligence. Question, back to our researchers here on the panel. Who makes those decisions? Who decides what understanding means? And what are the assumptions in AI? Who are the people who do research, who conduct research and development, and who operate the levers at big corporations? Lots of questions wrapped into one, but let's start with those thoughts. Or maybe you've got other ideas. Answer? To answer this question, there are different initiatives, also EU initiatives. There is a checklist for ethics in Germany. We have a platform, Learning Systems. We looked into the future of work. What does it mean? Does the use of AI mean? What are points we need to consider? For instance, protection of individuals. Is that trustworthy? Is the machine worth our trust? Not trust for its own sake. Then distribution of work, division of labor. We don't want to become slaves of a machine, which is already the case in some cases. Examples, for instance. For instance, at a hospital. In hospital, the nursing staff, the healthcare staff have to collect a lot of data for invoicing. They are degraded to data collectors. You would think they would have more time for patients, but that is not true. And there is a danger that you say at one point, we want to do this more efficiently. We want to optimize matters, make it more profitable. And we don't need those social aspects as long as the people are processed efficiently. So you have to think about that in general, what our yardsticks are, what our criteria are. So how can we introduce social and psychological factors? Is it good when the hospital becomes more efficient, but people are becoming more dissatisfied? So what do I have to use as a basis, and how do I do it in concrete terms? It's one thing to compile checklists, but how can I implement that? And I think it's very important that you have a design process where all the people affected are being involved, ideally at a development stage. I see time and again how many great ideas there are, and how many great ideas rather you get from end users, how you could use technology. It's nothing to do with age. Young people have great ideas for things they are interested in. Elderly people have great ideas for their needs. And you often think people hate technology. There is an enmity towards technology, but that is not true. But then people get the impression that things are not imposed upon them. Maybe I can add something to come up with criteria is very, very important. This is a question we have to sort out as a society. AI as such is a very powerful tool. It's like a gearbox, a set of gears, like a transmission system. It can do things faster. I can fit it in a wind turbine, I can fit it in a tank. And to determine under which circumstances would we want to use AI, where do we define boundaries and limits, and this is still very much an open issue which needs discussion. Also, discussion in a framework like this, that AI is being questioned, is being discussed. How does it work? What are the limits? Where are the boundaries? Do I want to have it in a drone? Do I want to have it in a surveillance camera? I would say no, personally. But there are lots of fields where it would really make sense. In medicine, for instance, when developing drugs, new drugs, and we have to define limits and have to see where do we invest for the future and where do we have limits. Where do we want to fit it? In a camera or in a drone? What does it mean, fitting it? We pretend as if there were a soul, an intelligence, or a conscience, an awareness, or rather consciousness, an awareness. This is a problem because it doesn't work like this. Artificial intelligence doesn't have a soul. It's not a ghost in the machine. It's not a ghost living in a machine, but it's just certain processes. It's pattern recognition processes at the basis which have certain aims, a certain way of working. I'm afraid that the narratives we have for AI, and I would suppose if you hear the word AI, okay, you think it's a dystopian vision, we are slaves of machines, we are being under surveillance by machines, or great, this is a utopian dream, there is artificial intelligence, but those utopian or dystopian visions conceal what AI really does, making it difficult for us, making it more difficult for us to understand the potential of artificial intelligence and machine learning. If you had a utopian dream, I would wonder or I would ask myself, how can we reach a situation that the public is included, is involved in this vision, a utopian dream that is great, that AI can help you. How can we achieve that? How can we get away from dystopian visions? In the cultural sciences, this is a basic assumption in the AI science, that those narratives conceal something. They don't allow us to understand how AI works. They make us stammer, so artificial stupidity. I've been around for quite a long time. I started with AI in 1990. I got my doctorate in 95, and I'm really surprised. The title of my PhD thesis in 95, I had made the mistake of using the word intelligent. After my PhD thesis, I presented several papers and presentations. The first question always was, what is intelligence? And I couldn't bear it anymore, so I left out intelligence. In the 90s, that was a very contentious issue, and it was said it was rather unfortunate to use this word. Now, many years later, on one occasion I said, what we are talking about in this group is machine learning, is deep learning. AI includes and involves much more. And the answer was, yes, that is clear. It is machine learning at the end of the day. It's deep learning. But still, we should use the word artificial intelligence. It's good for political reasons. When I now see the developments over the years, I'm really amazed. I'm quite surprised. In the 1990s, I come from the German Research Center for AI, and there was an AI winter. Companies pretended they used AI, but that was not the case. We went to the CeBIT trade show, and we said, this is not artificial intelligence, this is just computing, because people were afraid of it. And now, all of a sudden, I'm supposed to say AI in all sorts of contexts. This doesn't come from the population doing it, it comes from somewhere else. And I must say, I'm surprised, I'm amazed.
Thank you for raising this interesting aspect and way of thought. I would also like to ask the audience if they have any follow-up questions or comments, remarks that they would like to make. As I already mentioned, we have 2 microphones here in the hall. Please approach the microphones if you have a question. Raise your hands if you want to ask a question, and I think we would really appreciate to hear about your thoughts. I already talked with Moritz about it. Why do you think the term artificial intelligence and intelligent has become such a metaphor? I know many aspects are part of my question, so it's difficult to answer it, but why are we so afraid of it? Of course, AI sells, we know that. That's an obvious answer to my question, but beyond that, why do people struggle with this term? First of all, it originated in 1955-56, and that's when it was used the first time in cybernetics. Before that, of course, people had already thought about automated machines and androids and machines that try to imitate human behavior. And it was always linked to fears of human beings not having control over the machines and not really understanding them. And that at some point they realize that they are impossible to control. I cannot understand the way they work. Look at Siri, or we look at movies like Ex Machina, and I always ask myself, why does Siri have a female human-like voice? Why is that even necessary? I believe that this is an attempt to make us think that although we know that this is not a human being, apparently we need this. Simon Natal, cultural researcher, said this is a trivial deception. And we need that when dealing with AI so that we are able to accept it and tell Siri good night, so that we are able to interact with these machines. We use these ways of thinking. We know it's intelligent and it is not a machine, but we interact with it as if it were. So maybe I could venture and say that we could say that we are humanizing machines or automating human beings. You already told us something about how we try to make the health system leaner. We only the cog in the machine, this very small wheel that is necessary for the system's logical functioning. So do you believe that this is a possible claim? Yes, that's exactly where the term robot originated in the 1920s, because that was when mass factories were built, when human beings became a machine, the cog in the machine, as I already said. When we think about Charlie Chaplin, Modern Times, that really reflects the fear that originated exactly when the term robot was coined by Robert Chaplik, and it actually derives from the term worker, not from the term human. That's different when we talk about the term android. That really relates to the way we appear, our appearance. But when we talk about robots, then the term that is used is linked to the way they work. Thank you very much. I hope everyone can hear me. I would like to talk about decision-making processes and AI. You mentioned the example of an algorithm used in hiring new staff. The question I ask myself is it important to know about the explanation of the AI, why it chose which person? For example, did it prefer applicants wearing glasses or not? Maybe this would be an explanation the AI could provide so that human beings could try to understand its decision. I mean, it's a possibility. So my question is, can the intelligent machine provide the explanation for its way of working? That is definitely something researchers are working on at the moment. Typically, if we had, for example, a facial recognition system where we try to analyze facial expressions, then we already see what the AI focused on. If we now mention the example of somebody wearing glasses, then we know what the AI focused on, and we can decide whether the AI was right or wrong, and we know whether the AI-based system focused on the person or the background, which would have been wrong. If the background was an atypical environment, a strange environment, then there would have been a reason for the AI to focus on that. But if it was neutral, then there wouldn't have been a reason. So, of course, there's also the risk of people blindly trusting the machine based on the knowledge that they have fared well so far by doing that, because they have only hired perfect applicants in the past. But still, the applicants do have a right to know why they weren't chosen, and you cannot tell them, well, you wore glasses, you know, and short hair, and from a statistical point of view, according to our data at least, these applicants were less suitable for the position. That's not possible. But the bias we have as a human being is something AI can expose and reveal. So from my point of view, this is also fascinating because we learn more about ourselves and us human beings. Imagine you have a study on human beings to find out what they pay attention to when they try to hire somebody or assess their personality. Do they have the same focus as a machine, or is it different? Is it possible to filter this information? Do you know if there are already approaches in research when we talk about these glasses to tell the AI that it shouldn't pay attention to glasses, but pay attention to other aspects instead, so that you train the AI? Certainly, you can do that manually or autonomously. We realize that the machine paid attention to bone structure when analyzing pictures of a lung, x-rays of lungs, or even paid attention to the background, which didn't really make sense for our field of application. So you can change the algorithm and the AI, but that is only provided that you know which regions the AI should focus on. That is also true for recommendation systems. When you realize that gender or age or aspects, they do not play an important role, that you address another way to them. You can give the machine feedback. You can ignore certain recommendations and give this feedback back to the machine, and the machine will then try to understand why you refused to use its recommendation. And through trial and error, you will finally realize, or the machine will realize, that focusing on the glasses wasn't the best choice. Robert, did you want to say something? No. I completely agree with what you said. There are many different options of trying to prevent that. It is only difficult if you do not know what to pay attention to. Now, in this example, we knew to pay attention to whether the AI focused on glasses or not. But if you do not know that, you need to find that out in the first place, which is a major challenge. Who came first? Thanks a lot. I'm confused by the language you use here on stage. You talk about a machine that can draw conclusions or inferences, a machine based on data sets, and by using the data, you then apply different algorithms that recognize patterns or properties based on the data. The machine doesn't recognize anything at all, but rather it is the algorithms that are based on big data sets in order to come up with logical conclusions. The examples you raised also confuse me, highly confuse me. An AI system that is used for hiring staff will not focus on facial expressions or glasses, will it? If we think about a bottom-up approach of evaluating faces, if you feed this data into an AI system and try to find out who is preferred and who isn't, then I see this as a data-driven approach, a bottom-up approach. A better procedure wouldn't only focus on the faces. Of course, facial expressions do play an important role, but other criteria do play a crucial role as well. And Professor André, I have a question for you. To which extent do systems already exist that focus on top-down procedures that already takes into consideration experiences that we have gained, and how can we use them in a targeted way instead of using a trial and error approach? That is what human beings do. if education is organized well, then we already have different tools that make it possible for us to draw consequences and learn from that instead of using trial and error approaches. And that is my question for you, Professor André. Thank you for raising these concerns. Why did I use this strange example of hiring new staff? I walked around the museum and the exhibit, and as I already said, the radio station Bayerischer Rundfunk has investigated this, and apparently there is a company that uses these properties and claims that it can select staff based on this data. Of course, we have different parameters that come into play here, and short video clips or even audio clips do not help us find the final solution because the whole picture is much bigger. So an AI-based system that supports the decision-making process does make sense, but we still need a human being to evaluate the AI choice. Trial and error approaches is based on the prerequisite that you already have a system that works well and that I only have to optimize. If I had a system that hasn't been trained well and that doesn't use a sufficient amount of data, then it wouldn't be acceptable to use this system on a broader level. If you use data sets and you analyze them, you do not do that without using an underlying theory or a model to base this upon, because everything else wouldn't really make sense or would even be boring. I visit a certain homepage, use the different data sets, and then see what the machine tells me. As a researcher or scientist, you really need to ask yourself, what is my responsibility or my job apart from hitting a certain button and having a look at the results? So the systemic basis from other disciplines is another important factor here. In my area of research, certain papers are not accepted if researchers claim that by means of their data set they found out about different properties of human beings in order to categorize them, if this is not based on an underlying theory. So this is important and crucial, and without this research or science itself, and I'm sure Robert will agree with me, wouldn't really make any sense for us and would be quite a boring endeavor. I would like to ask you what exactly you mean when you point out different theories. I know there's a student competition on AI, which is about showing students how to handle AI and how to come up with their own algorithms. A very smart student developed a certain system, and the problem he faced was that chicken were carried away or even killed by a fox, and he came up with a system with a door that would open and close depending on whether there was a fox or not. This was a data-driven approach. He used images of chicken and foxes and trained the AI to differentiate between the two. If you said that you need a theory as a basis, what do you imagine in this specific example? How could he relate this to a top-down approach? Well, I think along the way we forgot that we do not only have machine learning but also symbolic AI. In my opinion, a hybrid AI is what our future will be all about. In many areas we have conducted numerous researches, developed theories, and now we forget all about it and discard it. The example you just raised about chicken and foxes, is a good example because students learn about reinforcement learning, and I do not have anything against that. But apart from that, if we have an autonomous, a self-driving car that will kill several people until we understand that the system isn't working well, then this is nonsense. So the AI we use is easier to understand, and that is a great benefit. Symbolic AI means, simply put, that there are certain rules that the system uses in order to act. Exactly, a knowledge-based system. We do not have that much time left. There's already one question from the audience, and I just want to ask you whether you wanted to add something. Yes, I'd like to briefly add something. Thank you very much for the question from the audience, because it shows us that we need to consider how we talk about AI. We say the machine does this and that. The machine understands this and that. So the way we speak, we already imply that the system acts autonomously, which is problematic. This is not the way autonomy works. Us human beings, we do not work autonomously either. We are part of a bigger collective system, of a network of people that support us, many different aspects, and that is true for AI as well. So firstly, we need to understand that AI is not limited to a system or a machine, but rather to everyone behind that, economical, political, social structures that resulted in the development of this AI-based system. And that also includes different decisions made by a computer scientist, whether this was feedback or bias. So we need to understand that AI is not autonomous, but it is a huge system of different human beings contributing their input. And in my opinion, that would be a much more logical way of treating this topic AI and to open this so-called black box. There is a question from the audience. So there's one more question from the virtual audience. Elisabeth André, I have a question. Isn't it possible that the images of the applicant were searched on the internet and then this is also used for the selection process? So isn't it possible that the images of the applicant were searched over the internet and that this was used in the hiring process? Can you repeat the question once again, please? So isn't it possible that the images of... Oh, not the images, but rather the CV of the applicant was looked up on the internet and that this was also part of the decision-making process, so the CV and the images, and that this is part of the decision-making process? Certainly, that would make sense. And I hope that the company we talked about actually did just that. Nobody says that through searching through the internet you cannot use suitable or usable data, but looking at the specific example, the selection process was not logical to anyone who would have thought about it in a more profound way. I am not saying that this is not sensible and that you should not use a machine to support your decision-making process. But I do say that at the moment, it would be quite risky to completely rely on the machine when it comes to making certain decisions. in fact, and that applies to any other area, for example, the medical industry. As a doctor, what do you do if the AI system gives you a diagnosis that you do not agree with? And then you, as a doctor, may reconsider, well, the AI uses such great and big data sets. And maybe if I rely on my opinion, then I will be held accountable for it. So maybe I should prefer the AI's decision, because then the AI will be held accountable for it. When we talk about the hiring process again, the decision is very decisive for the applicant's future. And what is so problematic is that the AI uses data, historical data of people who have already been hired, knowing, okay, this has been a successful application in the past. So the question is, could you integrate more knowledge into this problematic pattern recognition process? Other knowledge, for example, tell the AI not to hire people that are similar to people that have been hired in the past. Could I use AI to help society emancipate itself, for example, or to change structures of power instead of reproducing them? Is that something research also considers? I would like to briefly answer that. Of course, we can do anything we like. The question is, what do we want? One more question from the audience. I would also like to seize the opportunity to mention another issue that I also associate with the title of this panel. I think about different expectations towards AI, starting with efficiency increases up to committees discussing how can AI help us mitigate climate change. So our expectations are high, but we tend to forget that AI might be part of the problem. For example, if we think about the consumption of resources or waste being generated, I ask myself whether this can be regarded as a problem, especially if we use more and more AI-based technologies. And is this actually something that we ignore because we think technology helps us instead of being an obstacle? Thank you very much. I also had this question on my list of questions. That is an essential question. Thank you very much. Linked to the different narratives we use, and we tend to regard, or we tend to see intelligence as something that is not connected to our body. It is something spiritual. And especially in the digitalized world, we tend to think that by using AI, that there are no chemical or mechanical processes behind it. We do not see the environmental pollution. We do not see the working processes that go into building these machines. So we dematerialize artificial intelligence, which is part of the problem, and those narratives and the long history. We regard intelligence as something connected to our mind or spirit, but that is not connected to the body. And I think that is a problem, and that's why we should start seeing AI as the material system behind it, and only then will we be able to understand how does AI work and how can we implement it in the best way. Especially in terms of the systems in which we use AI, you already depicted the different fields of tension very well. Problems arise due to AI, and in terms of climate change, energy consumption, for example, is very high. At the same time, colleagues of mine are researching into how to use machine learning in order to improve climate change modeling and predictions about what will happen if we do not act. So I think the range of possibilities is endless, and it is up to us to decide how to use AI for the best. Before handing over to Elisabeth for some concluding words, I would like to highlight that we need to think about narratives and ideologies once we start thinking about AI as a system that solves our technical problems. Tech solutionism is a term coined in the United States, and it means that historical, political problems from times of capitalism or even colonialism are problems that we think can be solved by technology. So these are my concluding words, and I think we should reconsider that and always bear in mind how AI has evolved over time. And now I would like to pass the floor to our panelists for some concluding words, if you bear with us, because we're already running out of time.
I hope AI in the future will serve humankind and be useful. I agree. The best way of finding out and to look what can every individual already use AI for. There are different websites, you get an idea, and it's great fun. I can recommend you do that. For instance, write 3 sentences, and the machine goes on writing and invents a story. So there are good websites for that. On my behalf, well, I agree with Ariana. I want to get away from a technical fix. The solutions we need, for instance, for the climate crisis, are cultural solutions. AI can be part of that, but needs to be embedded in societal change. My hope for AI is, how can I design AI in such a way that it enables participation and is accessible? And this is my hope. Right, I would get away from AI. We have to change how people deal with AI or use AI. Thank you very much for your input. I would say that concludes this panel discussion, and we will go on in a moment. So seamlessly, there will be the next panel discussion. So have a safe journey back home, and see you next time.